Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner McFarland? Here. Commissioner Curriasi? Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Here.
Commissioner Mulder?
Here.
Commissioner Levy?
Here.
Commissioner Scavdall?
Here. Director Ford, do we have any agenda modifications this evening?
We have no modifications and no late submittals.
Okay, good, thank you. We may, after we go through the consent calendar, if somebody pulls something for a quick question or minor, I may ask the commission if we want to take that up before the hearing on the lighting ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll take public comment on non-agenda items. If anybody here in the room or on Zoom would like to address the commission on matters that are not on this evening's agenda but are pertinent to the commission's business, please do so now. And first, I'll just look to see if anybody in the room would like to approach the podium. And if you're on Zoom, please press star 9 to raise your hand if you'd like to speak at this time. Seeing no hands or anybody in the room approaching the podium, we will close public comment on non-agenda items and go to the consent agenda. There are several matters on the consent agenda this evening. I will read the title to each one, and if anybody on the commission in the room or on Zoom has a question or comment on those, we will pull those and take them up later in the meeting. So as I go through each item, I will check with you. Item 1 is MMF Land V or 5 LLC in the Benbow area. A conditional use permit.
I do have a question or two for staff about that might be worth pulling.
Okay, so we will pull item 1. Item 2 is the Kernishorn LLC conditional use permit and special permit in the Mad River area. Commissioners, anybody like to pull that matter?
I have a very small question about that one as well. So I guess I would, not necessarily for a staff report, but for at least.
Let's pull it, and when we get to it, I'll ask you
Thank
if
you.
we need a staff report. Okay. Item 3 is Eagles Nest Farm LLC in the Whitethorn area. This is a continuance, so if anybody would like to pull this for a comment or discussion on the continuance of this year's use permit to a date uncertain. Nobody on the commission, and I see nobody in the room indicating or anybody online, so that will remain on consent. Item 4, Sodfather LLC conditional use permit is also being continued to a date uncertain. So again, only pull this, we'll only pull if you have a question on the continuance or comment, and I see no hands raised. So that will stay on consent. Item 5 is Standard and Green Diamond Resource Company General Plan Amendment, Zone Reclassification and Lot Line Adjustment in the Fickle Hill area of Arcata. Commissioners, I see nobody in the room raising a hand and nobody online, so that stays on consent. Item 6, Tower Company conditional use permit in the Eureka area. Commissioners, stays, and checking in the room and online, I see no hands raised online, so that item 6 stays on consent. Item 7, Recology Humboldt Coastal Development Permit and Conditional Use Permit Modification in the Samoa area. Commissioners, again, nobody in the room or online indicating comments on that, so that will stay on consent. Item 8, Freedley Minor Subdivision and Coastal Development Permit Extension in the Myrtletown area. Commissioners and nobody in the room or online indicating they want to comment, so that will stay on consent. Item 9 is General Plan Conformance Review for 2 projects, a water storage tank and improvements to Veterans Park in the Willow Creek area. Again, checking with commissioners. And in the room and online, nobody's indicating they want to comment on that, so that will remain on consent. So I believe we were pulling 1 and 2, and 3 through 9 remain on consent. Can I have a motion?
I'd like to motion to approve the consent calendar items E3 through 9.
I have a motion from Commissioner West.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Moldar. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I think we can do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, we had, Commissioners, are you all right if we take up items 1 and 2 from the consent calendar before we go to the other?
It sounds like it was just clarifying questions and not full staff reports, so I would say yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Commissioner Levy,
Okay.
you have the floor for item 1.
Well, okay, thank you. This is concerning the MMF Land v. LLC application. I have no overall concerns about this project, and I thought the staff report is pretty thorough, but the one thing that, like, I read the staff report a couple of times. I looked at the other documents too, and I wasn't totally clear on, the concern I have is about water storage and about the somewhat confusing status of some of the storage involved here. But it seems that, if I'm understanding correctly, that there may be only a total of 602,000 gallons of storage between the sort of approved pond that is not an in-stream pond and the hard tank storage, and yet their need is 650. And so I just wanted to I just didn't think that it had been fully fleshed out that if they don't have 650, like how that will be handled. That was my question. Just wanted to make sure that was not an ambiguity or something that had been overlooked.
Our thought on this is that they are going to be cultivating during some of the portion that they're able to actually take some water out of the what is essentially a diversion from the one rainwater catchment pond that is also on stream.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we do, as typical, have conditions that they do the water meters and record keeping, so that anticipate getting that fleshed out as we do annual inspections.
Okay, so bottom line is you do think that the total water resources that they have can legally support the estimated need of 650,000?
We do believe so. It is something that we are going to be looking at when we go out to do the inspection and as we get records of what they're actually using. Because at this point, that's really, their best estimate. And as we've found, as we go out and do inspections of these sites, once they have been permitted, oftentimes their estimates can be high, sometimes they're low.
Right.
But they're not always dead on,
That satisfies me.
The one other thing I would add is that they are they're contemplating pursuing an LSAA amendment to add that third pond in, which would provide additional water for them if necessary. But that's not something that's currently permitted.
Right.
The way that we had kind of written this, I believe, was to give them that opportunity if they do get that LSAA amended.
Thank you.
Correct?
Any other questions?
No, the staff presented it the way that I saw it, is that for forbearance, they could use some of that water up into the forbearance period. So
Yeah.
that's the way I read the staff report, so.
Okay, and that does make sense. That may have just been my sort of oversight.
So, just to make the numbers add up, so they need 650,000. They're gonna store 302,005, and then the 347,500 gallons is what you think they're gonna be able to take which is more than half. Am I reading it wrong?
I don't have it quite in front of me, but most of that, the delta between the 300,000 gallon rainwater catchment pond and the 650 that they're saying would be needed is going to be provided in hard tank storage. Not the entirety, but I believe it's 228,000 is going to be provided by hard tank storage.
Well,
Oh, with an additional 75,000.
right,
gallons.
which
So on
brings
top
it to
of that-
302.
Right.
Yeah, so,
And
So
the difference between
602
650 and 302.5 is 347.5, and that's gonna come from,
So sorry, if I could start over, there's the 300,000 gallon rainwater catchment ponds, and then with their proposed additional storage tanks, they will have a total of 602,000 gallons in water storage. So 302,000 in hard tank storage and 300,000 from the one rainwater catchment pond that is truly rainwater catchment and not on stream.
I guess it's just the way it's written, it's hard to see that.
It is a bit complicated, but the shortfall, which is only about 40,000 gallons, is,
The overlap water.
yes, yes.
Commissioner Levy, do you feel your concerns are been answered by staff?
absolutely.
Okay, then I'd make a motion to approve MMF Land V or 5 LLC in the Bimbo area and adopt the resolution 555, which finds the planning commission has considered the mitigated negative declaration previously adopted for the commercial medical marijuana land use ordinance and the addendum that was prepared for MMF Land V LLC project, and finds that the proposed project complies with the general plan and zoning ordinance and approves the MMF Land V LLC conditional use permit subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Moldar. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Levy. Any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 2, Commissioner Levy, Kernish-on LLC, conditional use permit.
Thank you. And again, with apologies to, ask questions about a project that I actually am fully in support of. But my question here was really simply about looking at there's a list of additional actions and conditions related to the LSAA or to CDFW's concerns. They're itemized on page 5 of the staff report. And I noticed that there were a couple of places in the staff report where we give a date that's already passed, or a date, there's 2 dates in 2024. Now, when I looked at COA, one of those being sorry, now I need to look back at that other document. I believe one of those I saw was kind of correct in the conditions of approval, correct in the sense that it's in the future rather than the past. That would be the submit a major amendment to the LSAA to include all work required by May 31st, 2025. So that hasn't happened yet, although the staff report said 2024. I'm assuming that's a typo, but really I was unclear about the previous number C, which says that submit and implement an erosion control plan by October 1st, 2024. That's obviously a date that's passed. Has that occurred, or? Anyway, you see where I'm going with this. Just thought those were important enough that we should make sure they're clear and consistent.
Yeah, so the CDFW provided comment with those specific dates. They're working with the applicant right now to revise the LSAA and extend it, and so that's still ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's where the confusion came in with the dates too.
No, the one that we have still in the conditions of approval, which is just where, if I were the applicant, I would be a little concerned by something in the COA saying that I need to have done something by October 1st, 2024, and that is still given as the date in the in condition of approval 12C. Mm-hmm. The previous one refers to October 1st, 2025. That's B. But C is October 1st, 2024. Has that, in fact, therefore, already occurred?
That work has not yet occurred. So really what happened here is, as we were working on getting this project to come forward to Planning Commission, this was actually last year around this time, and CDFW provided comments.
Right.
I believe that the applicant had kind of decided that he wasn't sure if he wanted to continue, given what was happening with the economy. But he has decided since that he does want to go forward and get a permit. And so what we tried to do is go through and update those dates, basically to reflect the current timing. And we obviously missed one. So
if that's the case, that you just missed it, and then just correct the COA to say 2025,
right,
in harmony with the other dates, that would make perfect sense.
So we recommend that if you do choose to approve this, that you recommend that, or that you approve it with an update to that one condition. That would make absolute sense to me.
Sure.
Good catch.
Well, thank you. No other concerns.
Any other questions from commissioners? Or in the room? Or online? I see none, so I'll entertain a motion.
Sure. Well, then I'll go ahead and move that we approve the Kernishon LLC conditional use permit and special permits, that we find the addendum to the environmental impact report for the ordinance, and find that the proposed project complies with the general plan and the zoning ordinance, and that we approve that conditional use permit and special permit as recommended by staff, subject to the conditions of approval, with a simple correction to the date in condition of approval 12C.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Commissioner Levy. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, we will take a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passed unanimously. Okay, we will now go to the public hearings, item F1. It's a second public hearing on the inland and coastal outdoor lighting ordinances for unincorporated Humboldt County. And Director Ford, I'll turn this over to you and staff for a report.
Thanks. I'll just kind of bring the commission up to speed while the staff is getting the presentation up. You'll recall we had a workshop on this ordinance, and so we went away, took the comments that we received, and worked on attempting to address those. We received additional comments from the public, and I think we've addressed those. And so we will present those tonight in a couple different ways. After Ms. Meehan goes through a short presentation, talking about basically an overview of what we've done, we're going to go through a very colorful version of the ordinance showing all the changes that have been made so you can see them. And then open it up to we suggest opening it up to the public after any commission questions. And then allow the commission then to start going through it chapter or verse, not verse, but section by section, sorry, line by line. And we will bring up a different version at that point that doesn't have all the red lines in it, so it's a little bit easier to look at and go through.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just if I may very briefly make an ex parte disclosure, I just want to note that I was not present for the workshop for this item, which occurred on March 20th. But I have reviewed all the materials, and I watched the video of the proceeding. You guys asked a lot of good questions and had a good discussion, so just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair. It should be sharing the presentation. Perfect. Thank you. My name is Rianne Megan, and I will be presenting the inland and coastal version of the outdoor lighting draft ordinance tonight. The intent of this ordinance is to promote safety, protect and preserve our nighttime skies, and address community complaints. And we want to reiterate, we are not trying to limit lighting, only provide standards to promote acceptable lighting that protects and achieves the intent of this ordinance. At the workshop on March 20th, we received comments from the Commission and the public to clarify glare, change the temperature requirement from 3,000 kelvins to 2,700 kelvins, remove temporary construction and facilities owned by county or other public agencies from the exemption section, remove hours of operation subsection from the commercial industrial use standards, and to create a coastal version of the ordinance. I do have a draft which will show those changes, which I will show at the end of this presentation. We received 8 public comments that called for a limit on light intensity and that our ordinance does not address or include streetlights. For some reason, it is not going to the next slide, even though it's on my page. I will stop the share and see if that will work. It disconnected us out of Zoom. It will just be a moment. Sorry about that. Okay. One public comment did state that the proposed ordinance is not addressing the community infrastructure policy, standard, and implementation measure relating to street lighting. The reason why that ordinance, or this ordinance is not addressing those measures is because per the implementation action plan, which is part of the 2017 Humboldt County General Plan, Appendix A, it is the responsibility of Public Works Land Use to address that. Planning and building does not regulate streetlights. So that is why it is not in this ordinance. In response to public comment, we are proposing that the commission consider a lumen max of 1,000 lumens for residential uses. Commercial industrial uses would be a 3,000 lumens maximum. We've got these numbers based off of public comment and Dark Sky International. That is one point that we would like the Planning Commission to discuss. We are flexible with the maximum number of lumens. We chose lumens because it is a standard unit that measures the amount of visible light emitted by a light source. And ideally, most, if not all, light bulb packages should have a lighting facts, which shows how many lumens it is, as well as the light temperature. So it should be easy for the public to find a light bulb that would meet the standards without having to do any math or make it complicated. So it should be a straightforward thing. And then just want to make it very clear, lumens is related to brightness and intensity, while kelvins is temperature. So lumens would be the light emitted, while kelvins is more of the appearance, the color that the light bulb gives off. It is possible to have a high lumen light bulb that gives a warm color and vice versa. So those are two different ways of, or aspects of lighting. And then when reviewing other jurisdictions' lighting ordinances, both Arcata and Eureka did not have a maximum lumens. While looking at other areas in California, Carmel by the Sea did have a maximum lumens of 400 for residential uses. Beaumont had 4 separate. They had a way of doing fully shielded, shielded, partly shielded, and unshielded. And I could go into detail on which each of those means, but they've had a range. And then Sonoma County decided on 1,000 lumens for residential. And it's important to note, cities like Beaumont and Malibu did not have any maximum lumens, but Beaumont and Malibu did hire lighting consultants. So that's how they got their numbers. It is unclear if Carmel by the Sea or Sonoma hired lighting consultants. And that will conclude that part of the presentation. I can either share the draft which shows the changes, or if there's any questions that would like to be addressed now with the slides open.
Commissioners, do you have any questions of staff on the presentation so far?
That I was wondering, and it's just a suggestion, it doesn't have to end up, but You made the comment about why you don't include streetlights, and I wondered if a reference like that could be included so that people reading it wouldn't have that question and not know the answer. I mean, just a reference that Public Works is the one that, is that appropriate?
You would like to have that placed in the ordinance itself?
I don't know, just so that if I'm reading the ordinance, I don't have that question and then someone has to answer it, if there's some sort of footnote or reference or,
Yeah, we could probably put in maybe a footnote
yeah.
that would just address the fact that streetlights are addressed separately. And yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Not that PG&E's gonna put in they're not doing streetlights anyway, I don't think, so you wouldn't, unless you did them yourself.
Well, the streetlights at this point are largely done by the districts that are created to maintain the streets, maintain the landscaping, maintain the streetlights. So
That was just a thought, just so that someone doesn't have to ask.
Commissioner O'Neill, you need to stay closer to the mic, I think.
It was just a recommendation. It's not-
Thank you. Commissioner West?
In the same vein, for the curious minds that are concerned about streetlights, is there a public input process for streetlights with the folks who have jurisdiction over that process?
So ultimately, that does need to be addressed or adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Whether the board would want, or Public Works would want to run that through the Planning Commission for consistency with what we're doing here. I mean, that could certainly be a recommendation that the Planning Commission makes, that the Planning Commission would like to be a part of the formation of those provisions when they're prepared and adopted.
Interesting.
Yes, Commissioner.
When you say when they're prepared or adopted, are you implying that there is a timeline and intention, or it's unknown at this time?
It's unknown at this time.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to see the red line document. I think it'd be after.
So this was the draft that went to the Planning Commission for the workshop. Anything redlined has been changed.
Can you make that text bigger?
Yes.
Sorry.
So anything in red has been since changed from the workshop. Planning Commission recommended staff to clarify the definition of glare. Upon reviewing it further, glare would be challenging to enforce. And through light trespass and light pollution, we are addressing glare. So we did remove any references to glare throughout this document. We added a sentence to general regulations to make it very clear that the following regulations should apply. There was some confusion on limiting the intensity and to meet the illumination needs, so we did remove that. We moved general regulations, the fully shielded or have a color temperature of 2,700 kelvins in lieu of being fully shielded to general regulations instead of having it in both residential and commercial industrial standards. The only difference between the inland and the coastal versions of this draft are the inland will say biological resources and the coastal will say environmentally sensitive habitat areas. We removed wildlife habitat because biological resources does encompass that. Removed references or exempting county or publicly owned agencies or utilities from exemptions as well as temporary construction lighting. revise lighting for residential use to say, please reference the general regulations. And then the purple is stuff that we have added since the publish of the staff report, and we will go into that in more detail on a cleaner draft.
Can I ask a question? So when you say 1,000 looms, is that like cumulative if you have multiple lights, or is that per light?
The intention was per light.
So if you had 15 lights, okay.
Yes. So it'd be per light bulb or light fixture. We removed shielding direction because it is for commercial and industrial use because it is addressed in the general regulations. Removed hours of operation per the Planning Commission's comments from the workshop.
Go back up and just address some of the other comments or the changes that are there.
We removed motion sensor lighting being encouraged in parking lots. That was a point of conversation in the workshop. And then the purple was, we'll address that on the cleaner version, but we removed the option of a special permit. It will now be addressed through a conditional use permit under modifications. And then in non-conforming lighting, there was a typo in the previous draft, so we did address that to encapsulate what the intent of that section is, where if the county receives a complaint for a lighting nuisance, it would be per the planning director to address that through code enforcement. And any, instead of all lighting being addressed for a substantial change or alteration, any lighting associated with the change or alteration would have to become compliant with the section instead of, any lighting that's on the property. And then the rest is adding definitions. So correlated color temperature, which is in relation to kelvins, removing the definition of glare, adding in the definition of lighting nuisance, defining lumen, and that will conclude the changes from the Planning Commission workshop. And then we could address the changes in purple afterwards when we go through the newer draft.
Any questions from commissioners on the changes? Yes. Commissioner Moldar?
Through the chair to staff, temporary construction lighting, that being removed, I just want to be clear that my understanding is we still allow temporary construction lighting because it's not in this ordinance. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes, it is still allowed.
Okay. I just want to thank you for, and then the other part is the non-conforming part, pre-adoption. Hypothetically, my understanding is this isn't technically adopted until the Board of Supervisors approve it. Is that correct or incorrect?
Actually, it's until the Board of Supervisors adopt it, and there's a 30-day period that it's got to go through before it becomes effective.
So if hypothetically someone's neighbor put in a light that was in their mind a nuisance, between this time and then, it would be under non-conforming. Is that correct?
Well, so that's an interesting question, because one of the things we're trying to address are those lights that are so obsessively bad that we wanted to create a mechanism to work with the property owner with the offending light to take away the nuisance and protect the adjoining property. And so we can go through that in more detail, but we massage the words a little bit to talk about, it's got to be something that's substantial.
Okay.
And that is being invested, that decision is being invested in the planning director, but anything the planning director does is appealable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just was trying to make sure this wasn't like a green light so someone could put in something really obnoxious really quick.
No, and that's really some of what's driving this, is there are some lights out there that we've received complaints about, that when people walk through their house, there's shadows on the wall because the light coming through their window is just so obnoxious. That would be a substantial nuisance.
Okay. I'm good with that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, Commissioner West?
Can you explain why there's a difference with the word choice between the inland and coastal for biological resources and environmentally sensitive habitat?
Got it?
And typically on inland projects, biological resources is what they're called. The Coastal Commission refers to biological resources as ESHA, which you might be familiar with, which stands for environmentally sensitive habitat. That's just their language for the coastal zone.
Okay.
Okay?
And I think the language change that you guys chose was because I think the previous one wasn't really well defined, so this has a definition that you can
Yeah.
refer to for both.
And when we send it to the Coastal Commission, they're going to want us to change it to say ESHA. So
Looking ahead, that makes sense. Thank you.
So, again, can you explain the process in the case of a project proponent that for whatever reason can't comply with the requirements of this ordinance? Maybe they need the lights to be higher or more, or different brightness, whatever. What process would they then go through?
It would now be through a conditional use permit. Prior edition of, or prior draft would say a special permit, but that was only for height exceptions. Now it will be only for commercial and industrial uses, but anything within those regulations, if they choose to exceed or modify those standards, they would have to go through a conditional use permit.
The reason we chose that is that a special permit technically can be done at the staff level. We could send out a notice to surrounding property owners, and it's called a notice of intent to approve. And if nobody says anything, then it can be approved. Or they can ask for a public hearing, but if they don't know how to respond to it, then their voice wouldn't be heard. And we just thought that if somebody's going to deviate from these standards that the commission spent a lot of time on, we spent a lot of time on, that it should be a high bar to deviate from them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I don't want to create a situation where most commercial projects are going to have to require a conditional use permit, but and so I'm just trying to make sure, I'm trying to think through this in my mind. Would that occur? Will there be particularly, let's say, if somebody wanted to illuminate a sign or something like that, if it's going to be higher than 20 feet, are those going to be the types of issues that we'll be dealing with, or security lighting on a higher building or any of those types of things? I think probably not, and some of those projects may be requiring conditional use permit for other matters regardless, but
So we haven't specified the height on a building. We've only specified the height on freestanding poles.
oh, okay, thanks for that clarification. Yes, okay, good. Okay, any other questions of commissioners to staff? If not, we'll open to public comment. So if anybody in the room or on the phone would like to comment on the lighting ordinance, now's the time. So I don't know, do we have anybody? Yep. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Shale Peck Kraus, and I have been farming in the Arcata Bottoms for the last 18 years. And I am grateful every time I have to walk out at night to check on my animals, which happens a lot during the winter time since the days are so short. I'm grateful to be able to look up into the sky and see stars, see meteors, satellites. It's such a precious resource that is not available to so many people who live in areas of light pollution. Sometimes when there's a ball game over in the stadium, like a third of the sky gets light pollution. And that's always a bummer, but it always reminds me to be really grateful for the fact that, like, most nights we have really great stars. So I'm really excited that this is something that's being discussed and that looks like there's going to be regulations on it, because I also live right next to property that the university just purchased, and that's my biggest concern with them developing that land is the night lighting. So I just wanted to say that I encourage you to go with the strictest lumens that Dark Skies International recommends, and the wildlife and all of us living out in the slightly more rural areas are going to really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Director Ford, do we have anybody online?
We do, but I do not see a hand up.
Okay, so if anybody online does want to comment, you need to press *9 to raise your hand. Otherwise, I
Just had somebody else pop in,
yeah, I
too.
just see somebody else. So if any of the callers are interested in making a comment on the lighting ordinance that we're discussing right now, please press *9 to raise your hand.
There you go.
And I see we have one, so if we can unmute caller 2223. Caller, you're unmuted.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, if you could speak up just a little bit.
Sure, how's that?
It's good, thank you.
Yes, good evening. I appreciate the county coming up with a lighting ordinance and taking this much time to get it right and figure it out. One of my concerns is, and I don't know if this is in the ordinance's guidelines, but there are a couple Highway 101 jumbotrons, I would call them, that you could see for miles and miles away. And I'm just concerned about those, and if that type of jumbotron type lighting is being addressed, because that really seems to pierce the night sky. So I'll leave it at that and let you guys do your professional work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One of my concerns is, and I don't know if this is in the
Director Ford, I think we did regulate some of that in our sign ordinance. If I'm,
Yeah, signage is really addressed in the sign ordinance
Yes.
and the lighting associated with signs.
yeah. So just before we go to bring it back to the commission, I just want to make sure I don't see any more comments, any more members of the public wishing to address the commission on this matter. So I'm going to close public comment and bring back to the commission. And Commissioner.
To just quickly follow up on the brightness of the sign question, I know we do have a sign ordinance that regulates signs. I don't recall if there was much of a process, though, for signs that were already pre-existing the sign ordinance, since the sign ordinance has been updated fairly recently, and I think the signs, my guess is the signs that the commenter is talking about have been around for several years. Is there a process to address the light spillover in the sign ordinance?
So if these, I wasn't sure if he was talking about billboards or if he was talking about the actual highway signs, because there are both. And there is a process to address billboards. Unfortunately, that involves buying the signs. There's a process in the Outdoor Advertising Act, and our sign ordinance captures that, to give notice of intent to purchase a sign. And give a period of time to, for the owner to continue to have that sign in operation, but then at a point, the county will pay for the value of the sign, the remaining value of the sign.
It's interesting. I had assumed he was talking about some of our electronic message signs, which is what came to mind for me, where that are very bright and you can see their aura before you can even see the sign.
Yeah, where are those at?
I don't want to call out specifically. There's one, I believe, on your way between Eureka and the Eel River Valley. That is the one that comes to mind for me.
Oh,
Yeah, they're not on unincorporated county
We don't have
properties.
jurisdiction in that area, I don't believe.
Is that
that is, yeah, that's a different jurisdiction.
oh, whose jurisdiction is that? Oh, is it tribal jurisdiction?
Yes.
Got it. Well, then I have comments that are not related to bright signs, if we're ready to move on.
Well, yeah, are we going to, comments on the ordinance itself?
Yes.
Okay, so are we going to go through the ordinance?
If you're
next?
ready, if there's no further just general questions, I think
Yeah.
what we would like to do is just go through the ordinance line by line and allow you to ask questions, make comments, ask for changes, whatever that may be.
Let's do that. Let's take a short break and come back and go line by line. Can we come back at top of the hour? Or shorter than that? Let's come back at 7. Reconvene the meeting from our brief recess, and
Recording in progress.
and we'll take up the outdoor lighting ordinance. If we could just pull that up and walk us through it. And commissioners, feel free to ask your questions as we go.
I pulled up the inland version, and I just want to reiterate the only difference right now is inland will have biological resources, coastal will have ESHA, environmentally sensitive habitat areas, but that's the only difference between the two versions right now.
We can stop
Good.
right there on purpose and just ask any questions, comments, anything of concern. And if not, can we move on, or do you want to look at that a little bit?
Looks good to me.
Do you have a question? Please.
Just a comment. Just starting off really strong. I really appreciate how much staff listened to our discussion last time and incorporated the changes. I'm very excited to see this draft.
Thank you.
Moving on to general regulations. Nothing has changed from prohibited lighting from the workshop to now. I'm gonna just keep going through the,
Do you have a question, please?
I think I just want to think a little bit about prohibited lighting, particularly the conditional use permit and the findings that are made for it. Thinking through potential projects that come before us and what we would be making these findings. And the two findings that are there, I'm trying to figure out how to thread the needle with protecting, I think, the enjoyment of the night sky, because it may be that it doesn't spill on the neighboring property, but I can imagine if you were to go to an area of the county that is known for its coastal views and its nighttime sky, and it's a big tourism area, and all of a sudden there are aerial lasers that are permitted, there's not really a finding that allows us to consider impact to the neighborhood and the enjoyment of the night sky. And I don't know how to find wording that also makes it so that like that all the neighbors can't necessarily shoot it down just because they don't like it. But making a finding considering the impact to the night sky.
So we could certainly add a finding here to the night sky. One of the concerns is most of those do absolutely impact the night sky, and that's why we're going to a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
And there are findings for a conditional use permit is that it must not be adverse to the public health, safety, and welfare.
So that is also in addition to these other conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I forgot about that piece. That's helpful.
So with that, are those okay, or would you like an additional finding relative to night sky?
That's a good question. I think it's a hard one because you're right. And there are, I think I can imagine situations where these would be appropriate, and there are situations where it would be really frustrating to be a neighbor or somebody running a business and have the night sky impacted so dramatically by one of these. And how do we, is the health, safety, welfare a strong enough mechanism to help us account for that when appropriate, but not blanket disallow it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the other policy decision that's there before you is just say, you know what, we don't want an out for these. We don't want the conditional use permit consideration. We just want to prohibit these.
My only thought there would be, if it was a special event that was on a temporary basis, like a concert or something like that, it would be, you know, I don't want to prohibit something that's potentially revenue generating. So you could add a third finding under 322 to something about the temporary nature. I'd be okay with that, but I would be nervous with an all-out ban.
I agree. I think that's where, thank you for articulating that. That's, I think for me, a temporary nature is much less impactful than an ongoing.
What if we said in 105.1-.3-2, a conditional use permit may allow for temporary lighting systems?
I'm in support of that. I'm curious what the rest of the commission thinks.
Yeah, I think it's sorry if I may.
No, that's fine, please.
I was wondering if there was, because I know that there was, I recall there being a discussion at the March 20th meeting workshop about ensuring that like a special event wasn't somehow a special event that can go year round. And so as we look at this particular provision, I was just wondering if there is any other language here, or perhaps it's alluding to other terms in county code that would further define what special event means, how temporary it must be. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to adding the word temporary to that provision as Director Ford suggested, but I'm just wondering what other interpretation of that term we may have.
I also am not opposed to adding it, the word temporary. I think the word special event itself signifies, in my mind, something that's special and once. But some of these special events can be annual, say it's a concert or a fair or those types of events. So
I wouldn't use the word temporary, because then I might come in and say, well, I'm not putting in temporary lights. I'm putting in permanent lights, but I'm only going to use them when I have a special event. So, I mean, I think it sounded fine before, just lighting systems, because that covers both permanent and temporary. It's the term special event, if it has a definition, then, you know, it's, I don't know what the definition of special event is.
That is defined in code, right? Special events are defined in code and do require a separate permit. Ironically, they require a special permit, but this would take it, if they wanted to use lighting, it would take the special permit to also include a conditional use permit, which would mean both of them would come to the commission.
I wouldn't put in temporary because I think it's too restrictive because, just lighting covers permanent or temporary. I think the special event says it all. Because I would say, well, then I'll just put in a permanent pole, but I'll just only use it when I have a special event.
Which I find it. I mean, it is perhaps, I'm being too fussy. I think it gets down to, defining what a special event is, which it sounds like we have. And if we have that, then there's enough to stand on referencing other things.
And again, it's a conditional use permit, so it's going to come before the commission, and if it's something we can't support, we won't support. They won't get their conditional use permit, but so I think we have it covered, in my view.
Yeah, I think that's where my original thought was. The findings would help us articulate that support or not support, but I think we've run the gamut. But I see Commissioner Levy has a thought.
Well, I mean, just from a grammatical perspective, we could put the word temporarily after used temporarily for a special event, and then it would not fall into the question of, is it a temporary light, is it a permanent light? It's just that it should be used temporarily. That may be redundant if special event is so defined as being, in its own way, temporarily constrained. But I just don't know what the definition of special event out there that may be. Yeah.
Commissioner Moldar. And then
I'm
Commissioner McFarland.
good with the language the way it originally was without temporary, especially what Commissioner O'Neill brought up. Someone might put in a more permanent pole that's used only for special events. Maybe it's a site, like that is used for multiple different types of special events. So someone's like maybe going to construct a site. I don't want to disallow that. And also thinking of the impact, maybe someone makes a event site, just throwing that out there. It sounds like we're going to get the definition of special event and then probably really agree the way it is now.
I thought the original question was whether or not the 105, 1321, and 322 covered your concerns about night sky. But then somehow we got under the temporary.
Yeah, but at the heart, my concerns were about, I think, whether the ongoing versus temporary nature of it.
I think the confusion there was that my original suggestion was to make it 105.1.3.2.2.3, so make it part of the subheading, not temporary in the upper one. I think that's where the original confusion with the word temporary came. So just that it's a finding of the special event permit that the use of the lighting is temporary in nature, so as not to disturb the dark sky standard, but not necessarily that the lighting system itself is temporary.
Yeah.
See, for me, it's kind of like if you're having a special event, and I guess it could be a wedding versus, the reggae on the river. But if you're putting in lighting for safety, for a temporary event, it's important that people are safe too. So I kind of, if there's a safety concern that requires lighting, then I guess it could be covered under the special permit, but I think there could be an exception in that case.
Yeah, I would just point out that we're really looking at aerial lasers, which aren't typically safety concerns. So there still is another way to illuminate your event for safety without using this type of prohibited lighting.
Okay.
With a little clarification, if I may. The special event provisions within the code are under the subsection called temporary uses. So it's within the code specifically for temporary uses, the special event section.
Well, that's helpful, and thank you for looking that up. And then to come back to what Chair Scovdell said, which is that all of this would be subject to a conditional use permit, which, you know, allows us to take a good look at the individual plan for this event. So I'm satisfied with it as it is, given all that.
So the consensus is we're good as is?
I think we are, and,
We beat it to death.
yeah, and just one more, I just want to, one more. All these lighting systems are prohibited except a conditional use permit for a special event. So we're not allowing a conditional use permit for, these lighting systems are prohibited for everything else. Right, so.
Yes, I'm very clear that someone can't put aerial lasers on top of their house to go off all night long.
Yes. All right. They're dancing on the roof. One time, wedding. Okay.
Go down to exempt.
Exempt lighting, please.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for some of the language changes around string lights and acknowledging that not all string lights are dim or unintrusive.
You guys sure you don't want to try to put a list of all the approved holidays in here?
I was going to say, I remember we belabored the point a fair bit last time, so I just wanted to make sure that we were all still in agreement, or.
Just making sure.
We could say,
My gut would be to remove it because this is a complaint-based enforcement. So if you put up holiday decorations, they're not going to be a problem unless they're egregious, and then you would get a complaint. And then this, without having the language in, if you have language in there that allows for an exemption, then if somebody does complain, it makes, in my opinion, harder for the county to make the finding that the lighting truly was egregious. So I would think removing it would be a safer bet, but I'm willing to go with how the commission votes.
yeah, temporary is also subject to interpretation. Mm-hmm.
I'm good with the way it is at the moment.
Okay. I think we're good with this section then?
You want to talk a little bit about this one?
So for lighting for residential use, they would be they would have to follow the general regulations of fully shielded, or in lieu of fully shielded, have that color temperature of 2,700 kelvins. We did add the maximum illumination section in response to public comments, and we got the 1,000 lumens based on public comments, which was through Dark Sky International.
Commissioner Muldaur?
So I don't know if I'm perceived biased on this one, but I looked up on my phone, and the lights that I wear for working when it's dark still, you know, when you're out there early, they're 3,000 lumens. So I don't know if I'd technically be non-compliant. Yeah, headlamp. I'd be non-compliant with this or not, but I'm a little concerned about the 1,000 lumens and even the 3,000 lumens, because they do make some headlamps that are like 4,000 lumens, but it's not a fixture. So I want to note that. The one headlamp is 3,000 lumens. I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable after looking at that with 1,000 lumens with actually the lumen cutoff, but maybe there's more background behind that.
Because it specifically states a fixture, and we've previously used the dark sky standards on permits that we've issued before, I think it's for consistency's sake, I would suggest leaving it.
Yeah, I mean,
Excuse me.
I really, really love my headlamps too. So I don't want to ban headlamps here. But I guess I do feel that with the fixtures, keeping with the dark sky standards and keeping with the standards that we've imposed on many individual projects already, you know, I feel like we can live with that. I can live with those limits.
I concur with Commissioner Levy. I do have a quick question, and this might be me being a little confused, but I'm looking at attachment 3, and I'm looking at section 105.5.15, where I'm looking at the lighting for residential use, and that subsection about maximum illumination isn't in it.
Right. When we said earlier, we were bringing forth some additional changes
Oh, thank you.
to
Thank
address
you.
public comments that we received.
It
This
was
is-
me missing that. Thank you.
Sounds like there's more people that are for the maximum, so I would be in support of the overall ordinance if that's where the straw poll is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to, I mean, again, I think it says outdoor lighting fixtures shall not exceed 1,000 lumens. I suppose if somebody wanted to get carried away, they're just going to put in a lot of fixtures. But I think the intent is good, and again, it's kind of a complaint-driven ordinance that gives the county something to rely on if we have a problem.
Well, I do want to say that for new construction, there is a discussion down below that we'll get to, talking about how this is going to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's coming in and, you know, their front door lamp gets reviewed, it's going to be a maximum of 1,000 lumens.
Yeah, understood. Again, we're not lighting experts here. I'm going under the assumption that somebody's 1,000 lumen front porch light is going to provide enough lighting for them to be able to walk up the steps safely or down the steps safely in their house and those types of issues. So I think that, you know, that's what we're trying to do, is we're not trying to have too much lighting.
Right.
But we need to have enough lighting in some of these circumstances for security or safety, right?
Absolutely agree.
So,
And I'll just add, the 1,000 is consistent with multiple public comment letters that we got.
correct. I saw that, and the standards that we were referencing, the national standards, so. Okay.
Move to the commercial.
The 3,000 is fine with me because it's, again, consistent with the dark sky standard and multiple public comment letters.
So we did add the modification section or subsection. If it is determined that someone does need a brighter light fixture, that would be one way that they can achieve that, would be through a conditional use permit. Same with height limit or the parking lots. Anything within the commercial industrial standards could be modified with the approval of a conditional use permit, given they could make the findings.
I appreciate that addition because we have a very geographically diverse county, so it allows for all those different cases. So I appreciate that addition.
Yes, and thanks. I just was sort of catching up. So that is saying that, because I think that's one of the biggest concerns that would have been raised, is that, you know, these may be good generally speaking as a general rule, but for this project, for this development, or for this event, we're going to need different we're going to need an exception process for that. And this seems to be saying, broadly speaking, anything under the commercial or industrial use that concerns the lighting, the maximum illumination, the height limit, or even the parking lots. Well, even more broadly than that, anything that falls under 105.16 can be subject to a CUP process to get an exception, basically. Okay.
Okay.
I would like to make it very clear we do not have that process for residential. It is only for commercial industrial.
Is there a reason why we don't allow for residential as well?
That is something that we are open for the commission to discuss. It's just, given this broad use of commercial industrial uses, that's where variance in lumens could really be more applicable, whereas residential lighting, how bright does it really need to be? But if the commission were to add that, we certainly can.
My only concern is if we're putting the 1,000 lumens and then there's going to be review later on in the new construction, if we're going to have review, and for whatever reason someone needs this light, it won't trespass off their property. I would hate for us to disallow potential new construction because of that. But I'm not a light expert either. I always think if we have a roadblock that we should allow a pathway forward as long as it doesn't negatively affect other people. And maybe I'm wrong in even saying that. I don't know.
If I could, you're not wrong. But I think our thinking is that illumination of like an entire site is far less necessary in a residential setting than in a commercial setting.
I would agree with that.
And so we are absolutely wanting to say in a residential setting, we're not creating a process that you can illuminate your whole yard and turn it into a parking lot or whatever. That's not to say that, if like on your front door, that you can't put two lights, one on each side of the door, to make sure that you've got a good illuminated area walking in. We're just not going to have excessively bright lights.
That makes sense. Okay.
Can I just ask how the parking lots or like bike lockers of like a residential apartment building or condos, how are those regulated?
Well, they're currently not in terms of lighting. So what would normally happen is a lot of those are permitted by right, so they go straight to building permit. So that's why when we get down a little bit lower, it talks about how the information needs to be submitted to demonstrate how the construction plans are in conformance with this ordinance. And so that would be done through the building permit process. The way that works is that when a building permit comes in, it's circulated to several different agencies and departments. One of them is across the hall to the planning unit. And a planner sits down and looks to make sure that it's in compliance with the zoning ordinance.
I think when Commissioner Molnar made his comment about having that potential, gateway for lack of restrictions, and so I think he was alluding to potentially adding the modifications things to the residential.
I understand that.
That was where my mind went, was do you need something like that to permit like a lit parking lot for safety in a residential area or a bike locker?
We chose not to do that because normally residential areas don't have, even a multifamily residential development can have sufficient parking lot lighting, walkway lighting that provides for adequate safety with the regulations that are in place here. without having to create the same kind of environment that you see. Some car dealerships are really responsible in how they deal with their lighting. Some are less so. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they mentioned that, driving into town, you can see the glow above the car dealership long before you can see the town.
Yep.
That's helpful, thank you.
My only, I don't know how, I guess I'm thinking that we might want to have some exceptions or a process for exception to the residential. And the only concern I have is more related to the rural residential properties. Residential properties in a subdivision are one thing. If you were out at my property where I stay this summer, and I said, hey, would you go out to the woodshed and bring in a load of firewood, and then you turn on a 1,000 lumen light bulb at the front porch, you're walking in the dark to the woodshed. So now, am I worried about it? Do I have neighbors? Is somebody going to complain? No. Not likely, and it's temporary. I'm going to flip the light on and lights out in the yard, and they're going to be more than 1,000 lumens. For somebody to walk out to the barn or walk out to the woodshed or whatever on rural country property. So if somebody came in to build a new home out there, are we telling them they can't do that?
Perhaps what you're talking about is something that's not really contemplated here, which is lighting on agricultural properties and the need to provide sufficient lighting around work areas.
Yeah.
And maybe agricultural areas could be treated similarly to how commercial areas are treated. Because even 3,000 lumens, that's bright.
Right.
But that would, I think, achieve what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's my only, I'm just kind of, again, and you're right, it's agricultural or it's just rural residential. And trust me, we like the night sky. That's why people are out in rural residential. But sometimes you have to turn the lights on. And you want to see where you're going. And I guess I'll wear a headlamp.
It's not a light fixture, at least.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing that up because, I have some pet cats that are very large, and there's some, pet bears out there that are very, very large as well. So
that's my only
something to think
concern.
about.
I'm not worried about the residential subdivision lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know that we want to get into necessarily regulating.
So if we were to say, sorry to interrupt, but if we were to say, create a separate provision for rural residential and agricultural properties over X number of acres, and then use 3,000 lumens?
I looked it up, and 1,000 looms is a 75 to 90 watt bulb. And like, what I have is lights that come on when you walk by, and cameras, so they go off, but they're there, and I'm sure they're probably more than 75 watt. But if you have cameras, you got to have lights if you want to catch, people, unless you have real special ones that are night ones. But that's not very much, 75 to 90. I don't know what a floodlight is, but it's probably more than 75 to 90 watts.
They come at various intensities.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, though, is most lights are going to LEDs, which is not the equivalent to a 75 to a 90 watt incandescent bulb.
That's what I was going to say. That's an equivalence to
A regular light
an
bulb.
incandescent bulb, but now for a much, much lower number of watts, you can have that same brightness. So
What I was getting at is if it comes on and then it goes off, it's not gonna be like you're keeping it on all night long, but it could come on when someone comes around your house or you're outside walking around, but then goes off. But there's no real provision for that.
Go ahead.
So what I'm hearing is we want to go back up to residential lighting and revisit the 1,000 lumens limitation and talk about whether that should be more or less and under what circumstances.
If it was just temporary, where it just comes on and doesn't stay on, but it's there for when you're out walking around or some bear walks up to your house, as soon as my light comes on, I know somebody's outside.
Understood, but I also know I've got a neighbor, and we're not writing this for my neighbor. I like my neighbor. But when their light comes on, it illuminates our yard completely.
But does it go off or does it stay on?
It stays on for about 10 minutes.
See, that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. I just have blackout curtains.
So,
Well, but that may not bother you, but what we're trying to do is address an overall objective for the county, which is to achieve dark sky standards, protect other people's properties, to not have to put up blackout curtains, that they can leave their window open, they can not have to close their drapes, whatever they want to do on their property.
I just would rather know somebody's lurking outside. To me, that's a safety concern. And as long as I don't leave it on all night long.
I opened this can of worms, but I was referring to rural residential properties or ag properties, probably 5 acres or larger, where you're not going to have any light spillover, that we allow them to go to 3,000 lumens.
Okay.
That's what I was proposing. And again, I have rural residential properties. I don't see anybody else's lights from my property, and I don't want to. And I hope they can't see my lights from my property, but I do want to be able to turn them on.
So could we go to the screen? And this is something I forgot, 105.1.4.6. These are exemptions.
Yep.
So if your front light porch is motion activated, which they do make those, then you could have it 5,000 lumens.
Well, no, we've set a maximum lumen.
You're exempt.
We would let these be completely exempt?
Yeah.
Provided there's no light trespass onto
My
neighboring
laser's coming on
properties.
when you walk by.
Okay.
I think,
So it's covered.
yeah.
Yep.
So you just got to, no light trespass is the big thing, where I've seen instances where those lights are not adjusted right, and the neighbor will politely say something to someone and they adjust it. The other thing is, a lot of times you can turn down how long your lights stay on for, which I've seen an area where a neighbor said something and they dropped it down to like 5 minutes.
So then, I guess, now that that's addressed, we can go and create a separate provision for rural residential, maybe even / agriculture, and just identify that the outdoor lighting fixtures can be 3,000 lumens?
Or we could, this sort of originally began with Commissioner Mulder noting that there is a pathway, there's already, of course, a more permissive standard for commercial and industrial, but there's also a pathway for a CUP to get, exceptions to the provisions that are really a problem for you. And we don't give that option for residential lighting. And I think you've already identified that, agriculture might kind of be falling in between those two, and it's not clear. But The question is, do we want to just raise it to 3,000 lumens across the board for any rural residential and ag fixtures? Or do we want to say that in general, that 1,000 lumen fixture should apply, but that if you need to make it, if you wish to make it higher, you can seek a conditional use permit?
Sure, we can do that. The only thing that I would offer for a residential property is that that's about a $6,000 cost.
Yeah.
So what we were trying to do is just say, here's the standard, and then not have people have to go through a bunch of hoops to do something else.
Right.
I would be satisfied if 105.1.6, lighting for commercial industrial use, said lighting for commercial, industrial, and agricultural use.
Okay.
Okay, that would cover off, I think, a lot of it.
I would totally support that too.
I think that would address my concern, actually.
That would address it, and then have motion lights all the way to the woodshed.
Which, in my mind, I think it's
Yeah.
hearing your points that are very relevant, and also acknowledging that there are people who enjoy the night sky and protect it, but you're going to have those folks who are not conscious of that and keep their really bright lights on all night and annoy all of their neighbors
Right.
in the rural areas, and having the motion sensor, I think, really helps minimize that
Yeah.
impact. So I'm happy with that.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
So at the end of that discussion, the only change we're actually making to the ordinance as written is adding agricultural into 105.16, 1.6.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Moving on to conformance review. We did remove commercial development. It should be any new or modified development in general, not just commercial.
It's fine with me.
Yep. Good.
Moving on to pre-existing lighting, I do apologize. That did change from the workshop. It was previously non-conforming lighting. Now it will be pre-existing lighting.
I want to say the importance of that change is that non-conforming is a term of art within planning and zoning law. So we didn't want to confuse that with what we're going to do down in 105.1.8.1.
I like 8.1 and 8.2.
And just to clarify, what I heard you say earlier is anything that the director decides is appealable, so that way there's a pathway forward if someone so chose. Okay, I feel it's fair to everyone then.
Okay.
Okay, so the only other changes would be definitions. I am unsure if we would like to go over the added definitions. Okay. So one that was added from the workshop would be the definition of lighting nuisance. This way we can enforce lighting nuisances.
So it's got to significantly impact or interfere with a person's enjoyment of their property. A nuisance can't be something that just annoys somebody. It's got to really affect their ability to be on their property.
So going back to your example of a neighbor's light that shines into your house, it doesn't affect your ability to occupy your house, but it does annoy you. Like where is that
bar.
It does if you have to do additional things like putting in blackout
Okay.
curtains
Okay.
in order to be in your house.
And I would add, I mean, nuisances, there's a lot of definitions in the law, a lot of cases that try to define what is and isn't a nuisance. So I think it's not just totally up for whatever anyone wants to make of that word, right?
That is correct, and if you want to hear the legal interpretation of it, I'll get out of the way and let county council explain to you the lecture she gave to me.
Lumen was added as a response to public comment. And that would be the final definition of the ordinance.
May I just make one small point under the definitions? Could you just go back up to do you still have the definition? I'm looking at my printed version, which doesn't have the latest red lines. But if you go to the top of that, you still have foot candle. I just noticed that foot candle is sort of, it's defined, and it's 1 foot candle is approximately equal to 10.76 lux. What's a lux again? I don't think that's defined, so I don't know that it needs to be. It's just one of the terms that I came across in reading about this or in the public comments that I didn't actually. Okay, lux, lumen. I know what lumen is. What's a lux? What's a luminaire? I'm not even sure that it matters, since you're just sort of saying it's approximately equivalent to that in case you're thinking in terms of luxes, but.
It was included just in case someone uses lux. It's kind of the meter equivalent of foot candle.
The what?
Meter.
Meter.
Yep. So it'd just be the metric version of foot candle. So depending on what
1
lighting
lumen
effects.
per square meter, in other words, is a lux.
I
Is that
believe
right?
so, yes.
Okay.
But we could also remove that one section. We do use foot candle within the commercial and industrial, now agricultural uses.
No, I'm not suggesting that you should get rid of the lux. I just wonder if you want to just say what a lux is right there.
We
It
should
says
just
that
stay
a
with foot
lux
candle.
is the amount of light that falls on a surface, and essentially a lux tells you how bright a space is considering the area being illuminated.
Oh, excuse me. I don't think we need the second sentence. I think you just define what a foot candle is and call it good.
Sure.
Yes.
If we're done going through the document, I'm interested in bringing us back around to the streetlight conversation, but I don't want to divert us from the
Let's see
document
if
conversation.
any commissioners have any more comments on this document.
I just
this
had
ordinance.
one quick clarifying question. So in the document, you removed the word recessed when talking about shielded lighting, and I was just like, I don't have a problem with it. I was just wondering why, because wouldn't those two be analogous because the recessed light is shielded? So I just wanted to know why it was removed.
It was just a tad redundant, so we
Okay.
just removed it for that purpose. We can always add it back if.
No, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Okay, before we go to the streetlight comment, do we need a motion on this then?
I think the streetlight discussion may be part of the motion, so you should
Okay,
probably do that first.
all right. Then we'll take Commissioner West's comment.
So, Director Ford, you were saying that the options for public process, it sounded like that it was primarily in Public Works' hands and that it would go before the Board of Supervisors. And there's a public process related to that if it were to go before the, if changes were to be made and go before the Board of Supervisors.
Well, anything that the Board of Supervisors approves is a public process. It's going to be at a public meeting where people can review what's proposed and comment on it.
Okay.
But it may be, the thing that I was saying is it may be helpful for the Planning Commission, since you've struggled with this now, to look at what's being proposed for streetlights and provide a recommendation to the board and ask to be able to be part of the review process.
Given that we've heard public concern and public interest in it, I would be interested in that request, but I'm curious what the rest of the commission feels.
I would agree. It's actually kind of surprising to me that the number of different people I heard mention, although I missed the workshop, that like the idea that streetlights and other county facilities were exempted, it just didn't sit right. And I know some of that, the larger issue has now been corrected in this version. And you've explained to us why streetlights can't be addressed like specifically here. But I feel that it would behoove us to ask to be involved in that process so that we can try to make them as consistent as practicable with this ordinance. That would be my preference.
I mean, I would support that. Can't hurt to ask.
I'm somewhat ambivalent on that issue. It doesn't seem like a land planning necessarily, getting to public infrastructure, but I'm sure if it came here, we'd comment on it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is like, the reason I see it in Public Works Department, because street lighting has to do with public safety and road safety. And from my perspective, I don't know that it's necessarily our lane, but I do agree if it did come here, we'd probably find a way to talk about it for 4 to 10 hours. Just so, I don't know. I know there's a lot of other things coming our way that we need to deal with. So I'm not wanting to like push like, hey, bring us something more. But then also I do hear the public comments and stuff like that. So I'd prefer it staying in the lane that it's in. But if I'm outvoted, then I'm outvoted.
I also think there are a lot of other standards already in place that govern the use of streetlights. The type of lighting, the amount of illumination required, spacing, all of that is I think covered in other design standards and documents, but.
Could we just like offer to the planning department that we would be available to review if they found it helpful for review for consistency, and then kind of put the ball in their court?
I think that's fine. I think we're always available for that.
I just feel like they're two different things. I mean, like what you said, there's different reasons why you have streetlights, and they don't really coincide with what we're talking about here.
So I'm hearing 3 and 3 for the most part. I think for me, my primary interest is having a public, it sounds like the public is interested and engaged on this topic, and having an outlet for the public to be engaged in public infrastructure.
Would it maybe be more palatable for the commission to include or include a comment to the board that there was substantial concern about streetlights, and the commission passes that along as a concern for the board to consider, as that is considered in the future?
I would support that.
I like that idea.
Sure, yeah.
Just a comment passing forward, like you said.
Yes.
Okay.
And the comment is just that there was concern?
There was a lot of concern, and the commission is concerned about the public concern relative to this and wants to make the board aware of that concern.
Seems like a very diplomatic compromise to me.
Thank you for coming up with it.
That's why he is the
He's trying to make sure we get a 6-0.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments on the inland and coastal outdoor lighting ordinances?
I just want to add to the chorus of thank yous to the staff for the great work on this, and to the commission. You had a really great discussion on March 20th, so thanks to you all.
And it's a shorter document than it was before per some of our commission's desires. So.
Yeah, I like that. It's clear, it's concise, and I think it will help the applicant as well as the reviewers, so good job. I call for a motion.
Does this cover searchlights, this type that, when I was growing up, they used to use them for advertising, like car dealers and stuff?
Actually, one of the lights that are identified in that list of prohibited lights
Prohibited.
that needs a
prohibited.
conditional use permit.
Okay.
So I believe the motion that we're all in agreement on is a motion to approve item F1, the inland and coastal outdoor lighting ordinances as recommended by staff, with the addition of the comment to the Board of Supervisors about the concern over street lighting.
And can we add the word agriculture to the commercial and industrial?
Yes.
Yeah, and perhaps more generally, any other additions that we specifically made in the discussion, because I just couldn't remember, but I think there might have been a couple others.
Probably were.
If I could, you could make a motion that it's with the changes recommended by staff and the changes that the Planning Commission made.
Okay. So I move that we approve item F1 as recommended by staff and the recommended additions from the Planning Commission.
Do we have a second on the motion from Commissioner West?
I'll second.
We have a second by Commissioner McFarland. Any discussion on the motion? I think we'd take a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And again, thank you. I think it's a job well done. We've covered items pulled from consent. Director Ford, do you have a report this evening?
I do only have one report to you. We are not going to be ready to have the hearing on the Regional Climate Action Plan on the 5th. I hate to do that, but prudence demands that we push that back a little bit. And we're struggling with how much time the We Are Up project will really take. So what we're going to do, subject to your okay, is to put the RCAP onto that agenda after We Are Up. If We Are Up includes 30 minutes of everybody being happy about it, then we can get into the RCAP. If it takes all night, then we'll just continue the RCAP to a different meeting.
Sorry, for which meeting?
June 26th.
June 26th, right, got it. So is that, does that mean that there will not be a June 5th meeting, or?
We are canceling the June 5th meeting.
Okay. So there's now just the one June meeting, June 26th,
Yes.
which We Are Up will certainly be covered, and RCAP will be on the agenda if time permits.
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
And we will try to get you the information as soon as you can, so you can start looking at things. because that will be a lot to internalize. I
Yeah,
do
that would be
recognize that.
appreciated if you could point us in that direction as soon as you can.
Yep.
Okay. Planning Commission, any other discussion items this evening?
I had a request from somebody from McKinleyville that wanted me to bring up that if we, or when we consider the town site plan for McKinleyville, that the commissioners be knowledgeable on the general plan for McKinleyville. So do you think that sounds reasonable?
Well, I think we will present the community plan and the general plan provisions as part of that discussion. Absolutely.
I promised them I would bring that up.
Okay. All right, we've covered our next meetings. Any other comments? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.